There's two important acts on this day of Eid. आज के दिन के दो अहम अमल हैं ईद के, यानी हम कहते हैं आज हम ईद मना रहे हैं, तो ईद वही मनाएंगे जो ये दो अमल करेंगे. There's two important parts of Eid. Everything else is superfluous or extra that we've added. But दो खास काम आज हमने करने हैं. एक ईद नमाज पढ़नी है. It's important that you read Eid namaz. It's an important part of your day. It's wajib upon you. It's compulsory upon you. जिसने ईद नमाज नहीं पढ़ी वो गुनाहगार होगा. If you don't read this namaz, you will, and you cannot make this up afterwards, because you have to read with congregation. So it's important that people understand Eid namaz. Some of our youth and our brothers, and you should explain this to them, that if you stay asleep in the morning and you miss your Eid namaz, you've missed the major part of the day. और दूसरा जो अमल है आज के दिन वो है कुर्बानी का. Qurbani is the second important thing that you must do today. So these are the two important things that you must do on this day. Anything else is extra. बाकी जो हम करते हैं, एक दूसरे से मिलते हैं, चावल खाते हैं, जो भी करते हैं ना, वो एक्स्ट्रा बातें हैं, वो मजीद बातें हैं. जो खास तो काम आज हमने करने हैं, जो हम पर लाजिम है, वो ईद नमाज है और कुर्बानी है. कुछ अब आप ये कहते हैं, some say that this, especially our Christian friends or our non-Muslim friends, they think that today we're celebrating the end of the Hajj. हम हज की खुशी मना रहे हैं. ये गलत फहमी है. This is a misunderstanding. Today's Eid that we're doing has nothing to do with the Hajj. It's a simple coincidence. It's not a coincidence, there's wisdom behind it. But as far as we're concerned, it's a coincidence that they happen at the same time. Eid started and became compulsory upon us when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina Sharif. Then Hajj became compulsory in the second to last year of the Prophet ﷺ's life, in the 9th year of Hijri, and the Prophet ﷺ passed away in the 10th year of Hijri. So it became right at the end. So this Eid happened many times before the Hajj became farz. And also, अगर किसी ने हज की खुशी मनानी है, तो जिन्होंने हज किया वो खुशी मनाएंगे पहले, सबसे ज्यादा उनका हक है. So those who've done Hajj, they should be celebrating Eid. लेकिन जो हाजी है ना, वो आज ईद नहीं मना रहे. They're not reading Eid namaz today, and nor are they carrying out the Qurbani that we carry out. हाजी जो कुर्बानी करते हैं आज के दिन, वो आज की कुर्बानी है. वो जो आज हम सुन्नत इब्राहिमी अदा करेंगे, वो कुर्बानी नहीं है. So they're doing totally different things today. And the Hajj also hasn't finished. आज हज तो नहीं मुकम्मल हुआ. आज उन्होंने रमी करनी है, तो आज तवाफ आखिरी तवाफ भी करना है, फिर उन्हें हल्क भी करनी है, फिर कुर्बानी भी करनी है, फिर उसके बाद उन्हें 2 या 3 रातें मिना में रहनी है, और फिर उन्हें पत्थर मारने हैं. So they've got a lot of things to do for the next 3 days. So the Hajj hasn't ended. So that's a common misunderstanding that people have, that we're celebrating the end of the Hajj. We're not celebrating the end of the Hajj. We're celebrating the Sunnat of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam today, which is a Qurbani. And that's the important thing. Because what's it to us sitting here, the people who've done Hajj? We've been going to work, we've been going to school, we've been doing our daily lives. The Haji out there who've been suffering. And today, unfortunately, many hundreds have died again today, crushed at the place of Mina. So we will do dua for them, and Allah Ta'ala raises them, their ranks, and gives them the rank of martyrdom in the place of Mina. And may Allah Ta'ala protect us. And the other issue is that we're all going to die one day. The ulama have said, Sheikh Mujaddid Al-Fisani फरमाते हैं कि असल मसला मरने का नहीं है, वो कैसे मरना है. That's the actual thing, how you die. Because we all have to die one day. So the only thing we can control is how we die. So you want to die in a state of Iman, and you want to die in a state of good. So those people who died in the blessed places of Mina, in the Kaaba, so they've been lucky. Some of us will die in our beds, some of us will die in the streets, some of us will die here in the world of Kufr, some of us will die doing whatever. So the issue isn't about whether you die or not, because we will all die. The issue is how you die, and that's the thing we try to control. And that's why the ulama have said that, and Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam said to their sons, don't die except being a Muslim. So make sure that when you get to the end of your life, you become a Muslim. And also, as you get older, you should get more wiser, and you must realize that you're coming to the end of your time, and therefore you must spend more and more of your time in ibadat, so that when death does come, it's more likely to come when you're older than younger. The law averages tells us that. So you must make sure that you're in a good state when you die. So that's the only thing you can control, which is why you should stay in the state of zikr. And as you get older, you should always try and stay in the state of wuzu as well. One, it adds to cleanliness if you do wuzu many times a day, but it also means that if you die in a state of wuzu, then you will have higher rank than if you just die in a normal state. So that's the only thing you can control. So today is all about Qurbani. So it's important that we undertake the Qurbani. It's wajib upon us. और एक ये भी गलतफहमी हम लोग कह देते हैं कि हमने एक कुर्बानी कर दी है घर में से. एक कुर्बानी एक घर के लिए काफी नहीं है. You can't just give one कुर्बानी for a whole household and think the whole family is covered. कुर्बानी जैसे नमाज हम हर एक पर फर्ज है, इसी तरह कुर्बानी भी हर एक पर फर्ज है. So whoever has enough money, who has the ability, and we talk about $7.5 of gold, or we talk about if anybody needs to pay zakat, has enough money, it probably works out about £1,500. If you have that much savings in your bank or in your hand, then you must do Qurbani. And every person who has that amount, so in one house, ek ghar mein se kayi Qurbani ho sakti hain, depending on the amount of people there who work or have that much money. Even if you don't work, but you have that much savings set aside, that spare cash, then you still have to give Qurbani. So everybody must give Qurbani themselves. And Qurbani is very important. The Prophet ﷺ said in a famous hadith and warned people that anybody who has the ability to give Qurbani, Nabi ﷺ ने फरमाया कि जिसके पास इतनी वुसअत हो कि वो कुर्बानी दे सके लेकिन ना दे, and he doesn't give Qurbani, वो हमारे मुसल्ले के करीब ना आए. He should not come to our Eidgah, should not come to our place of worship, meaning stay away, because all the Muslims congregate in the Eidgah, so it's where all the Muslims will be. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever has the ability to give Qurbani and doesn't, you stay away. और फिका का मसला यह है कि अगर आपने पिछले सालों में कुर्बानी नहीं दी किसी वजह से, यानी आपके पास वुसअत थी उस साल में लेकिन आपने नहीं दी गफलत की वजह से या किसी और परेशानी की वजह से, then you have to make it up now. उसकी कज़ा भी हो सकती. If you don't make it up, you will have guna upon you. So you must make that up. So you must try and think back the days before you were religious or the days before you knew, and you can remember that you had enough money on those Eids, then you must make that Qurbani up. It's important that you do. If you don't, you will be sinful. The other masla is that जो कुर्बानी होती है वो ईद नमाज के बाद होती है. You must do your Qurbani after the Eid namaz, not before it. The Prophet ﷺ said that जिसने ईद नमाज से कबल कुर्बानी की उसने बाद सदका किया, it's just normal सदका, normal कुर्बानी. But the one who did it after Eid namaz, वो कुर्बानी होगी जो आज की जो हमने अदा करनी है. So you must do it after your Eid namaz. And the other masla is that on Eid al-Fitr you should eat something in the morning. ताकि पता चले कि आपने रोजा खोल दिया है. So you eat something in the morning. But on Eid al-Adha you should try and stay hungry and not eat anything until your Qurbani is given. And then ideally you should try and eat the Qurbani gosht as well. और दूसरा हमारा ये मसला है कि जो असल सुन्नत इब्राहिमी है वो है खून बहाना. It's to like slaughter the animal. That's the actual sunnat. Unfortunately, what's happened today is that we're moving away from that. We're simply thinking it's easier to give money, and we send money through a charity or through relatives, and they perform the Qurbani for us. But we're actually missing out on the actual meaning of the Qurbani. Because this Qurbani is not about sadaqah. ये जो कुर्बानी है अक्सर कुछ लोग जैसे भी समझते हैं कि ये कुर्बानी है, ये गरीबों की इमदाद है ताकि हम गरीबों को दे दें. It's nothing to do with helping the poor. Helping the poor एक ज़िम्नन बात है. यानी कुर्बानी का गोश्त जमा हो जाता है तो फिर उसको क्या करें, तो फिर हम दे देते हैं, उसका हमें स्वाब मिल जाता है जो हम सदका करते हैं कुर्बानी का गोश्त. लेकिन अगर कोई शख्स कुर्बानी करे और पूरा गोश्त अपने घर में रख ले और खुद खाए तो उसकी कुर्बानी हो जाएगी. It's not a condition that you give the Qurbani out. The actual Qurbani is that you slaughter an animal in the name of Allah Ta'ala. That's the actual Qurbani, that's the purpose of it. If you kept all the gosh yourself at home and ate it yourself, which wouldn't be a wise thing to do, but if you did do that, your Qurbani would still be valid. Your Qurbani would have been done. So the fact that we give it to the poor, that's a secondary element or something that as a consequence of us having the ghost. But it's not a condition of the Qurbani. So it's nothing about helping the poor. And if you want to help the poor, you have 364 other days of the year to help the poor. And you give them money. This is about gosht. This is about slaughtering the animal. And if you were thinking about helping the poor, you wouldn't give them gosht. You don't give them meat. Because meat is expensive. And if you really want these people, अक्सर जो गरीब है उनको दाल ही नहीं मिलती तो हम उनको गोश्त दे रहे हैं. अगर सोचा जाए तो उसको ये है कि वो गोश्त का पैसा उसके अलावा हम और चीज़ें उनको दे दें, घर बना दें या उनको दाल दे दें ताकि वो पूरा साल खा लें. Because once the gosht is finished. And plus gosht has an expiry date. Whereas if you gave them lentils or rice, that lasts a lot longer. So this thing is not about helping the poor. That's a secondary element. The actual meaning of the Qurbani is that you slaughter the animal in the name of Allah Ta'ala, and you remember the sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The Prophet Sahaba Ikram ने नबी पाक सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम से पूछा कि ये जो कुर्बानी हम करते हैं आज के दिन ये क्या है? तो नबी पाक सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने फरमाया कि ये आपके बाप इब्राहिम अलैहि सलाम की सुन्नत है. This is the sunnah of your father Ibrahim alayhi salam. All the Arabs were descended from Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, from Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam, so they had a connection with Ibrahim alayhi salam and they saw them as their father. So they had that link with Ibrahim alayhi salam. So this Qurbani is a sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the whole purpose of this Qurbani is to remember that sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. और दूसरा ये भी हमारे पास मसला है कि अक्सर हम कह देते हैं कि ये सुन्नत है, यानी सुन्नत इब्राहिमी है, तो लोग समझते हैं ये सुन्नत है. यहाँ जो माना सुन्नत का है ना, वो है तरीका, एक अमल. उससे ये माना नहीं है कि अक्सर हम कहते हैं ये अमल सुन्नत है तो ये वॉलंटरी काम हो गया, करेंगे तो ठीक है, ना करेंगे तो कुछ भी नहीं होगा. दिस इज वाजिब अपन यू. जो लफ्ज सुन्नत इस्तेमाल किया गया है उसका माना यह है कि ये उनके तरीका है, ये उनका अमल था जिसको हम याद कर रहे हैं. But actually it's farz upon you, it's wajib upon you. You must do it. So don't think that just because we say it's a sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam that it's voluntary. You do it or you don't do it. It's up to you. You have to do it. Even then, when we use the word sunnah, you must act upon the sunnah wherever you can, because there's many wisdoms in the sunnah and acting upon the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's another matter for another day. So this is compulsory upon us, and it's the sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam that we do this. So we must try and remember why are we carrying out this act of Ibrahim alayhi salam ourselves again today. What's the whole purpose of it? This act happened. There are many other acts that people did, but we don't imitate those. But we've been told to imitate this act of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam and perform the Qurbani. So there must be some wisdom in that, because every act that Allah Ta'ala tells us to do, there's a lot of wisdom in it. We might not be able to see, but there's a lot of wisdom in it. For example, Allah Ta'ala tells us not to drink alcohol. Most people would have thought, what's wrong with drinking a little bit of alcohol? But where we live today, we could see the evil effects of alcohol. You could see how many people's lives have been destroyed by alcohol. And you can see what happens. People lose their jobs, lose their families, lose all their wealth because of that. So you can see the amal, and then we also know the health factors about the health disadvantages, not benefits of alcohol that happen to people. So we know that there is, and it's before our eyes. There's many other acts that we probably can't see at the moment, but maybe over time we'll find out that they're bad. Things that we think are good for us turn out to be very bad for us. Previously, about 70, 80 years ago, people thought smoking was good for you. I thought it's a way to relax, but now people are saying it's very bad for you, and they're trying to ban it. And similarly, 70, 80 years ago when Coca-Cola first started, that was actually a medicine, and people thought it's good for you, but now people realize it's bad for you, and that you should stop drinking it. So over time things change, so we don't use our intellect. When Allah Ta'ala has told us something to do, we must believe as Muslims that there is wisdom in it. Because Allah Ta'ala loves us. In a famous hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, Allah Ta'ala loves you more than a mother loves a child. So we must believe in that. And that's why that then act upon the commandments that Allah Ta'ala has given us, that we believe in this, and there is wisdom in this. So when we perform the Qurbani, what are we trying to remember? Hum kya yaad kar rahe hain? What's Allah Ta'ala trying to tell us? And the famous verse that I recited at the start, Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran that Allah Ta'ala doesn't need or doesn't want the blood and the meat of the animal that you're given. What does Allah want? He wants at-taqwa minkum. He wants piety from you. He wants you to become pious. He wants you to become God-fearing. That's the whole purpose of doing this Qurbani, is to become God-fearing. Not that Allah Ta'ala needs the meat or Allah Ta'ala needs the blood. So then the question arises, why do we? तो फिर हम क्यों खून बहा रहे हैं? Because if we look, are there other ways of getting taqwa? But Allah Ta'ala tells us this is an important way of attaining a taqwa, if you remember what you do it for. आजकल अनफॉर्चुनेटली बदकिस्मती आजकल जो कुर्बानी एक मेला बन गया है. अगर आप पाकिस्तान में जाएं या मुसलमान मुल्कों में जाएं तो एक कुर्बानी की गोश्त, कुर्बानी का जानवर लेना और एक यानी मेला बन गया है. अक्सर आप अखबारों में देखते हैं, कार्टून भी आते हैं कुर्बानी की गोश्त के मुतल्लक, कुर्बानी के जानवर के मुतल्लक, और ये सब कुछ एक बहुत हमारे जो दीन से दूरी का एक सबब है और दूरी का नतीजा भी है. सबब भी है और नतीजा भी है. जो दूर नहीं है उनका सबब बन जाता है, और जो दूर है वो नतीजा है उनका. Because the whole purpose of giving Qurbani is that when you slaughter the animal, you should actually be upset, not be happy that much. You should actually be upset. Because what are you remembering? You're remembering the sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So what did Ibrahim alayhi salam do? He didn't slaughter an animal. He was about to sacrifice his son. The other thing to remember, it wasn't any ordinary son. Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam became very old and he had no children. And he asked Allah Ta'ala for his child. And even at the old age, we find that many of the prophets, when they reached old age, Sayyidina Zakaria al-Islam said to Allah Ta'ala, my bones are weak now, but I still ask you for a child. He said, my wife is old, and Zakaria al-Islam said, my bones are weak, but I still ask you for a child. And Allah Ta'ala gave him Yahya al-Islam, who came at the time of Isa al-Islam. But this is the belief that the prophets of Allah Ta'ala and the people of Allah Ta'ala had. They knew that they don't need to worry about what apparently looks. Because when Sayyidina Zakaria al-Islam said, my bones are weak, how old do you think he was? People who are 50 or 60, they've still got strong bones and feel strong. The fact he used my bones are weak must mean he must have been very old. Must have been in his 80s or 90s, and he still asked Allah Ta'ala, he still believed Allah Ta'ala could give him a child at that age. Because they knew, they had belief that what Allah Ta'ala wants, he can give. So sometimes we despair thinking what's going to happen. This is going wrong, that's going wrong, or I can't see how these things will happen. But if you have complete tawakkul and belief in Allah Ta'ala can make anything happen if you have complete belief in Allah Ta'ala. Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam was given a son at a very old age. So when you get something after a long time, and waiting a long time, how precious would that thing be? Sometimes we don't think much of something because we get it easy. Sometimes when you have to work for it, and work hard for it, then you understand and appreciate its worth. So Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam received a son in old age. Then, which was Sayyidina Ismail al-Islam. So you can imagine how much they must have loved and appreciated that child. We don't appreciate our sons and we don't appreciate our children at the moment. But we should do. Sayyidina Amir Muawiyah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, one of the great caliphs of Islam, one of the great Sahaba Ikram, they were sitting once after the Prophet passed away in a gathering of people, and they were talking about, and they said that when your children ask you for something, give it to them, if it's permissible, if it's good. Don't put restrictions on them too much, because if you show that you love them, they will become your strength. But what we do, we don't appreciate that. We put restrictions on our children and we turn them against us. And then they rather becoming our strength, they become our weakness. So Sayyidina Amir Muawiyah said that you must appreciate your children, look after them, make them love you as well, and you love them as well. And then they will become your strength. You'll have that connection. So it's important that we don't impose restrictions on children, and we don't tighten them so much that they turn against us. So it's a two-way thing. We say that our children are becoming bad, but we need to think about what we are doing as well with them. The Prophet ﷺ was once in a gathering of the Sahaba Ikram. The Prophet ﷺ kissed his grandchildren. And a Bedouin from the villages was there, and he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're kissing your children? We never do that. Showing that we don't show this love. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if Allah has made your hearts hard, what fault is that of mine? I mean that, if you don't love your children, that's your fault. But the Prophet ﷺ loved his children and appreciated them. So we should understand this from what the Sahaba Ikram and the Prophet ﷺ told us about caring for our children and appreciating them. So Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam received this child at very old age. And then Allah Ta'ala commanded him to sacrifice him. So you can imagine how hard that must have been for Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam. After such a long time, at a time when he didn't expect to receive a child, he had a child. How much must he have loved that child? But then Allah Ta'ala told him to sacrifice that child. So how hard must that have been for him? But Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam did it. Because we said earlier, the prophets of Allah Ta'ala knew that if Allah Ta'ala was ordering him to do something, there must be some wisdom in that. And he knew that, and they also knew that Allah Ta'ala gave it. Allah Ta'ala gave the son, now he wants it back. So who is Ibrahim al-Islam to argue? And similarly, we must think about that in our lives. Sometimes when we get something, we get very, very happy and go overboard with our happiness and believe that it's all our earnings. If someone's got a lot of money or someone's got a lot of education, they think that's all because of us. But you must remember it's from Allah Ta'ala. So whenever Allah Ta'ala gives you something, be grateful. And then when He goes away, because Allah Ta'ala has said that days will swing around between people. Some days you will be on the up and some days you will be down. And this is all a test from Allah Ta'ala. And then when He goes away, we get really upset. But you've got to remember Allah Ta'ala gave it to you, and if Allah Ta'ala is taking it away, why are you being upset for? So the people of Allah Ta'ala, when they are given something, they are grateful. And when it's taken away from them, they show patience upon it. And know that there's wisdom from Allah Ta'ala from it. When Allah Ta'ala gives you something, it's a test to see how you react. And then when Allah Ta'ala takes it away from you, He then tests you as well. And some of the Sufiya Ikram said that when Allah Ta'ala takes something away from you, it's because He loves you. And He's giving you an opportunity to show how much you love Allah Ta'ala back. So if you really love Allah Ta'ala back, you will be patient upon it. And not start screaming or wailing or blaming everybody else. You will show patience upon it. And thank Allah Ta'ala even more that He's given you the opportunity to get close to Him. So another famous hadith, Prophet ﷺ said that when Allah Ta'ala loves somebody, He puts hardships in his way, so that then he can overcome them and increase his rank and get closer to Allah Ta'ala. Because we've seen that sometimes when you get successful and you get a lot of money and you get a lot of success, you then forget about Allah Ta'ala and stay away. It's only when you get a knockback, when you get a kick in the teeth, like for example, that you then remember Allah Ta'ala. So in one way, all these hardships that come in your way, you will then, because when you've got nobody else to go to in your hardship, who do you turn to? You turn to Allah Ta'ala. So that's why the Sufiya Ikram have said that you will get these hardships in your way, and that's a sign that Allah Ta'ala loves you, so you show patience upon them. So Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam was then about to slaughter his son and sacrifice his son for Allah Ta'ala. So when he was about to sacrifice his son, what do you think he was feeling? That's that exact feeling that Allah Ta'ala wants to remind us about. That's that taqwa that Allah Ta'ala wants us to remember. That feeling when Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam was about to sacrifice his son in the name of Allah Ta'ala. If Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam was about to sacrifice his son in the name of Allah Ta'ala, what else greater is there? And who are we from sacrificing our time, our money, our efforts? And the other thing to think about is this. When you have to sacrifice something of yourself, like you're sacrificing your time or your hardship, that's easier than sacrificing somebody else you love. For example, parents put themselves through hardships for their sons and their children and their daughters, and also sometimes that actually helps you. And it's easier to sacrifice yourself, to go without sleep. But it's hard for you to see somebody else that you love suffering. So you're happy to suffer yourself, but you're not happy to see someone else suffering. And sometimes, and we've got to think about it on another point, sometimes when we sacrifice, we have to be careful that our ego doesn't become big. Because sometimes you go through sacrifice and hardships for Allah Ta'ala, and then you start feeling good about yourself. And you think people are going to like this. And that's a dangerous thing of sacrifice, because then you're not doing it for Allah Ta'ala anymore, you're doing it to please your own ego. And on the day of judgment, there'll be many people who come. For example, somebody will come who killed himself in battle for Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala would say, there's no Jannat for you, there's nothing here for you, because you didn't do that. You didn't sacrifice for me, you sacrificed so that people will applaud you. And you sacrificed because that pleased you, not me. And there's nothing for you here, because you got what you wanted, which was your pleasure and the pleasure of the people. So it's important that when you do put yourself through sacrifice, you always keep your niyat and your sincerity clean, that you're doing it for Allah Ta'ala, and be careful that your own ego isn't growing because of that. But they're saying it's easy to sacrifice yourself, but it's hard for you to see the suffering of someone else. But Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam was not going to suffer himself, he was about to sacrifice his son. He's about to put pain upon his son that he loved, which is harder than if he was had to do it to yourself, because that connection that you had and that love you had with the child. So so when we are slaughtering our animal, that's what we must try and remember. And that can only come if you are sacrificing yourself, not by just simply giving money all the time. We know it's difficult now, but we should try at least once or twice, or sometimes intermittently in our lives, to try and sacrifice the animal ourselves, or at least be present next to the animal, that when that happens. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the famous hadith Ibn Majah Sharif, I think, Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, the Prophet ﷺ's daughter, the Prophet ﷺ ordered her to stand next to the animal that was being slaughtered. So her animal was being slaughtered, and because she's a lady, usually the men slaughter the animal because you have to control it and stand next to it. And those people who've been and seen sacrifices happen, you see the animal suffer, and it's hard for you at that time. That's why the person who has a knife in their hand must really be strong, because you can't give up halfway, because you'll make the animal suffer even more. And the Prophet ﷺ did say that, try to minimize the suffering on the animal. That's why you have a sharp knife and you have a strong hand, so you can do it quickly, so the animal suffers less, and do it quickly. But when you see that animal become scared and tremble, that does have an impact on your heart. But then you overcome that by knowing that you're doing it for Allah Ta'ala, that you're carrying out this sacrifice for Allah Ta'ala, and that you become stronger by that. That's the whole purpose of doing it. Nowadays, when we're simply just giving our money to charities or sending our money away and the sacrifice happens, we've lost that connection with the true sunnat that we should be seeing, that we see that blood flow. And then that's hard for us. It doesn't matter how strong you are, it does make you tremble, it does make you sad, and it does make you think, why am I doing this? Then you remind yourself that you're doing this because Ibrahim alayhi salam did this not to an animal, but to a son, and was about to carry this out. So that's the sunnah that you try to remember, that you will do whatever Allah Ta'ala asks you to do, and you will believe in it, and there will be great wisdom in it. And that's what Allah Ta'ala is trying to bring in our hearts, that if you are now prepared to sacrifice your own son in the name of Allah Ta'ala, what else is there left in the world that you can't give for Allah Ta'ala? What is more precious than your own son that you wouldn't give in the path of Allah Ta'ala? Your time, your own body, your own money. What is there that you can't give, which is much more greater than that? That's the taqwa that Allah Ta'ala is trying to build in your heart and make you stronger to withstand all the temptations and all the wrongdoings that could befall upon you. So that's what we're trying to do. Got a few more minutes now. Recently, not recently, but in the last 200-300 years, quite a lot has been written and said about the Qurbani, and people have been trying to move us away from the Qurbani, and they've said things like, why don't you just help the poor? Because the Qurbani, why don't you just give the money to the poor rather than sacrifice an animal? And I said earlier to the brothers who were here earlier, the Qurbani is nothing to do with helping the poor. If you want to help the poor, help the poor. But that's nothing to do with Qurbani. Qurbani that we give to the poor is extra help that we give them. But giving Qurbani doesn't stop you giving extra money to the poor people as well. So the whole purpose of Qurbani isn't to help the poor, it's to make sure that we build our hearts up and remember the sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Other people then say that it's a waste of an animal. Look how many animals are being slaughtered on this day. And so many animals are being slaughtered, this is a waste of time, and you're wasting animals, the animals will die out if you do all this. So don't do Qurbani, just give sadaqah instead, because they're trying to move us away from the true sunnat. But this is again a fallacy, and it's illogical. A lot of these arguments that are made against Islam, they seem good at the start, but then when you think about them constructively and logically, then you realize that they're all default. That's why you see a lot of academic people and our scientists becoming Muslims, because first they think Islam seems a bit dodgy, but when they look into it properly and understand it and research it, then they realize actually the wisdom in it. And those people who know it and have intellect can see it much quicker and much better than normal people. But if we know that the amount of animals that are slaughtered on this day, but then the next all of us will have gosht today, because from the sacrifice of the animal, or wherever in the world animals are being sacrificed today. But then you know that for the next 2 to 3 or 4 weeks, very little animals will be sacrificed, because there'll be no demand for new animals, because people will already have enough meat from the Qurbani that they won't need to go to the shops or won't need to slaughter any more animals for Qurbani, because they already have enough meat. Therefore, if you average it out, logic tells you that we should actually have the same average. If anything, there'll be less animals slaughtered, because once you've had all the Qurbani ghosts like they do in our countries, you actually don't want any more ghosts for the next 2 or 3 weeks either, because you've had too much. So if anything, there probably is a drop in the amount of animals slaughtered overall than there is actually at that particular time. So all you've done is push the demand into 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, that demand that would have been there over a longer period of time. So you haven't actually slaughtered any more animals and even wasted any animals, because the same amount of animals are being given. And there isn't a waste of animal, because that meat isn't going in the bin. We're either going to eat it ourselves or we're going to distribute it amongst relatives and to the poor. I said earlier, you don't have to, it's not a condition of your Qurbani that you distribute the food to anybody. That's a secondary element that we do, because there's too much gosht, too much meat, what are we going to do with it ourselves? Therefore you give it to the poor and you get extra reward. But if you kept all the meat at home because you can eat it all, your Qurbani is still done. You have fulfilled the condition and wajibat of Qurbani, you've done it. The fact you give it out will give you more reward, and the fact you're helping the poor people out will give you more reward. So you give it out, so that is not wasted at all. The other element people say is that by eating too much meat, now a lot of health people are saying that we eat a lot of meat on this Eid and the next few days, and that's bad for your health. It is bad for our health, but as I said, there's no reason for you to eat it all. You don't, because you've given Qurbani, it's not conditioned that you eat the meat as well yourself. If you eat it, it's good. But if you have a health condition or whatever, you don't have to eat the ghost. It's not a condition of you giving Qurbani. Once you sacrifice the animal, that your Qurbani is done. Whether you eat it or give it out is a secondary element. And then also, if people do get ill by eating too much ghost, the simple answer is don't eat too much. There's no one telling you to stuff yourself with ghost that you have to eat it. Distribute it out or spread it out. If you're ill, don't eat it, or eat in moderation. Islam is about moderation. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if anybody wants to eat to his fill, if you want to fill your stomach, then what you should do is have a third for food, a third for water, and a third for breathing. So you shouldn't really be stuffing yourself anyway. Anybody who's doing that is acting against Islam. But just by making these excuses up against it, that we won't do it, and we won't get it. The other thing to remember is that when you're slaughtering your animal, you're actually helping the animal. Because Allah Ta'ala says, the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, that on the day of judgment, the animal that you've given will be presented on the day of judgment to you. And it'll come with its horns, and it'll come with its ears, and it will come as it is, intact. So it will be there for you. And it will go with you into paradise in some narrations as well. But those animals that we sacrifice in Qurbani will end up in paradise. So in effect, you are helping the animal. Because I believe the animal will then enter into paradise and will be there on the day of judgment as well. So the other point to remember is that it's important that you get to know the animal that you sacrifice as well. And you have some sort of connection with the animal. And also try and give a really good animal. Sometimes we try to be poor. We try not to be poor, but we try to be stingy and miserly. And try and look for the cheapest option, especially through charities, or try and find the cheapest option that we can fulfill our Qurbani. But you should give according to your worth. Depending on how much money you've got. If you've got a lot of money, then you should try and give a really good animal that costs a lot, that will then benefit other people. Because on the day of judgment, the animal will be there with you. So it'll be a waste of time if you had lots of money in the bank, but you went for the weakest and the cheapest animal. If you've got the money, have it there on that day. One of the biggest issues that we have as Muslims is that we've got a lot of money here, but to be honest, we don't need it here. You don't need all this goodness, don't need all this money here, because you're only here for 70, 80, 90 years. And people who are in their 60s and 70s will tell you time flies very fast. People who are in their 40s will try and say that when I was 20, that was yesterday, and time is moving so fast. So you don't really need these mod cons, and you don't really need the benefits in this world here. What you really need is to have some way of getting this wealth that you have into the next world. Because in the next world you will be there forever. So you really want to transfer the stuff you have here into the next world. And one of the ways of transferring your wealth into the next world is by giving sadaqah, is by spending in the path of Allah Ta'ala, is by, for example, the Qurbani, by having really good animals in the next world. So it's something that will stand you in good stead and benefit you there. So if you have the ability to give a very good animal, then give a very good animal that you can. And also then have that feeling that this is a very good animal, but I'm sacrificing it in the name of Allah Ta'ala. And bring that upon your heart. It's easy to sacrifice something that's immaterial or not worth something, but it's very difficult and becomes harder the more expensive, the more better, the more beautiful it is. And that's why in the old countries, when we used to try and buy the animal, you would look for the most beautiful animal, the biggest animal, the good-looking animal, the healthy animal, as the one you could find, so that you could give that as Qurbani, so that on the day of judgment when it's presented, you'll have something that's good and something that's nice, rather than give something that's cheap that you might be ashamed of or might not look good. So we've got a few minutes over time. So those people who haven't given the Qurbani, they must give it after Eid Namaz today, and you've got 3 days to give it. If there's any previous years where you never gave Qurbani, you must make those years up as well, or else you will be sinful for those, because they were wajib upon you, if they were. And if you basically pay zakat, which is around 13, 14, 1,500 pounds, if you have that much wealth, then you must give the Qurbani. And everybody in the household who has that much wealth, whether you're working or not, this isn't like an income tax. It's based on what you own. It's like a wealth tax. So you give it based on your wealth, not on what you earn. So you could be earning millions, but if you've got no wealth in the bank because you spend that much on reason, then you don't give Qurbani. But if you're not working but you still have a good bank balance, then you must give Qurbani. So we'll move on to the Tariqah of Eid Namaz, and it's also on this day you should try and help and giving good causes. Whenever you've got a Qurbani, you should also give in the path of Allah Ta'ala as much as you can. And never close your hand, because when you close your hand, then Allah Ta'ala might close His hand on you. And one of the things the Sufiya Ikram said is that if you want your wealth to increase, then give more, because Allah Ta'ala has promised that He will give you more back. If you give one, Allah Ta'ala will give you up to 700 times, if not even more. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran. So give in the path of Allah Ta'ala. And also don't make this an excuse that I don't trust this mosque, or I don't trust that charity, or I've got nowhere to give it to. It's your responsibility to give. So then you go and find somebody who you trust or you can give to, and you give it to them. but you must give it. Don't make this as an excuse that I got no one to trust or can. The Prophet ﷺ said one of the signs of Qiyamah will be that people will be carrying around their sadaqah and they'll have no one to give it to. And there'll be and one of the meanings is they won't trust anybody. Another meaning will be that there'll be no one worthy enough to give it to. There'll be no good cause to give it to, because people will have become that much rich. So the Sufiya Ikram also said that the fact that there are poor people in society is a blessing for you, because through them you can give your sadaqah. If there weren't any poor people and there weren't any causes for you to give to, how would you give your sadaqah? What would you do? And there's certain rulings that you have to give sadaqah to the poor. If you do certain mistakes, certain punishments are that you feed the poor. Now if there aren't any poor around, how do you do that? Therefore the poor are a blessing, and sometimes we knock the poor and we look down on the poor, but actually the poor there are a great aid to you and a great support to you, and you need the poor, and you should be thankful to the poor that they're there and show them a lot of respect, because through them you are fulfilling your religious obligations. For example, if you fall ill or a calamity is about to befall you, you give sadaqah to the poor and Allah Ta'ala will lift that calamity. Or if you're about to go into a big business venture, or you're about to go into some sort of venture or some sort of activity, then you should always give sadaqah before that, so that Allah Ta'ala will lift any calamities that might befall that. Therefore you should be thankful for that there are good causes that you can give to, not that you turn away from them. So always keep giving. I'm not saying give to any particular mosque or any particular charity, but you in your hearts must also have that belief that you will always keep giving. Keep giving. If you don't trust anybody, that's no excuse. Find somebody that you do trust to give to, but you must keep giving. The onus is on you to give, not on causes to come up to you and prove themselves to be worthy. You do your research, or you do whatever your heart feels good, and then you give. So